Start in so we can try and finish in a timely way. To those of you long-suffering people who have decided to remain for the recap panel, what's interesting is that you're largely in the same place you were this morning. So whatever happened to that group over here, they're late starters and they're early departers. Listen, what we're going to do, and this is really going to be conversational, and I think hopefully will include conversation with those of you in the audience who've gained some impressions throughout the day about really this issue. And so I want to ask the panel to sort of think about the day, think about the things that you've heard or experienced today, and really try and frame it in this sense. And I think, Tim, that your notion today in the gas panel was the right way. What are the things that are impeding us? Let's go back to some assumptions here. The assumption is that most people think there's not going to be anything happen nationally before November 2012, and maybe not until January of 2013 in the way of comprehensive energy policy. So let's make some assumptions that nothing does happen, but then it's January of 2013, and you have an opportunity to be with the President of the United States, and you want to share with them something from today that you think would be important for the political leaders. And we're not going to say whether Republican or Democrat, for the political leaders to understand about the importance of linking energy and climate policy going forward. And I know it's tough not knowing who that is, but I think it is important for us not to vary our message necessarily just because the leader may be a Democrat or a Republican. What would you say? And I'm going to ask all the panelists to do this and try and do it pretty quickly.
Tony said at the last panel, organize, organize, organize. I would say persist, persist, persist. You know, the country's with us. Majority of the people are with us. You know, we've gotten weak-kneed about it all. We've gotten scared off by a very small minority who happen to be very well organized. And you've got to turn around and say to people, it is time to persist. This is important. It has to do with your children's health and your grandchildren's health, and you have that responsibility, and you know it, you know, and people do know it. So that's what I would say, and that is also the final thing. My favorite political quote is Franklin Roosevelt in 1936. 1936, Franklin Roosevelt said about the banking industry, in my first term, the banking industry met their match. In my second term, they met their master. Mm-hmm. Now that is persistence. That's saying, you know, we really are going after this.
So Kelly, a similar question, but I'm going to ask you to address this disconnect, because in your panel, they talked about how the American public is really with people who believe that clean energy should sort of be the next thing. And yet it seems like the decision makers are not moving in that fashion. It's January of 2013. It's a whole new day, but we have to somehow solve the disconnect. What would you say to the political leaders in Congress or the President of the United States about that disconnect to try and bridge it?
Well, for me, I mean, I live in Amsterdam, and I run a global organization, and with a lot of focus on the climate negotiations. One thing that's amazing to me in all of these discussions over the last 2 days is that topic has barely, I don't even think I heard it come up at all, and that is the role that the U.S. plays in relation to climate policy in the rest of the world. And the fact that the United States not moving is bringing the whole rest of the world down with it. And there's a real reluctance from countries like China or India or Brazil or whatever to move and do what they need to do, because why should they until the U.S. moves? So I would never get elected, and I'm probably not a very good lobbyist, because the main thing I would say to them is, you know, forget what's politically expedient here, but you need to take responsibility for your role in the world and do what's right.
Is there a vehicle for doing that that's, you know, that's going to resonate with people from both sides of the aisle? Because I heard it as a governor traveling around the world, people are waiting for the United States of America. What's the vehicle that would make people on both sides of the aisle, again, understand our leadership role here and the inability of the rest of the world to move until we do?
Well, the U.S. used to be, it used to take pride in being a very moral country and holding a strong, high moral standard in the world. And at the moment, the U.S. reputation in the climate field in the rest of the world is really low. And people feel very strongly that, the U.S. is not living up to this moral responsibility. And I think that should be something that would shame or embarrass these folks with, the strong American ideals and everything we stand for. And we're not doing that. We're not living up to that. And I don't know what better. There's no, it's not something, when you talk about adaptation, Tony mentioned that in the last panel. You can't sell the need for helping communities adapt on the basis of clean energy. Well, what about the role in helping countries like Bangladesh or African countries or whatever, and cause the least amount of the problem, and who are going to suffer the worst? And we have a moral obligation to help them. So, somehow we need to put more morality back into the picture.
Which fits really with what Tim said about the adamancy, the way to persist. The way to do this is to convince the leadership to persist. You have to keep doing it. So, Dick, to you've been here the whole day. You come from an interesting place in that you have a real sense about the space that renewable energy can play as we move forward in our energy portfolio, but also you wear the name of an oil and gas company. There's been a lot of that talk today. I'd like to know how today's discussion colors your thinking and what you might say to the leadership in January 2013.
Yeah, I can sum today up in 3 P's. It's passion, projectiles, and participants. And the passion is, there's plenty of passion in this room, there's plenty of passion in our day, it's there. But my first boss had an interesting saying about data and information. You can have a lot of data, it's very hard to get it to information. So it's how do you get passion to vision to action. Number 2 are the projectiles. I love the silver bullet, silver buckshot analogy. But if you think of that buckshot all travels together in this solution. And it's like a roulette game where the roulette wheel has 6 or 7 balls in it. And there's going to be 6 or 7 winners put together. But the participant thing is, yesterday morning, Governor, I cringed when I heard the good guys, bad guys thing. Because in my mind, this is not a good guys, bad guys thing. This is an us guys thing. And if I had $1 for every time in the last couple of days that I heard the word battle or war or fight or what have you, I could have probably built a wind farm. What I'd like to offer is that maybe it's more healthy to think of this as our enemy is not ourselves or the oil companies or the politicians or the banks, or we had a whole list. Our enemy, I believe, is time. And we all need and so Washington, I think what I would tell whoever becomes president and the Congress hopefully coming in, that you have time as your enemy and you need to act fast because this is not getting better.
Of all the people who have a role to play, energy companies, and particularly energy companies that have some, traditional form of fossil fuel, they probably have a great deal that can happen on the Hill because they say it should happen. I mean, they have a great lobbying power, so there's a responsibility there.
We spend a lot of time there, and when I can get into a senator's or a congressman's office, it's not just the wind message, it's the overall energy message.
Right.
It's going to take this whole thing.
And people may or may not know the CEO of Shell was one of the first really big players to commit to full transparency in natural gas extraction on the hydraulic fracturing. Yeah. Just one side note about passion. Earlier today, I saw a guy sitting back there, kind of in the back, drinking passion tea, but he says, it's okay because I'm drinking a calming tea at the same time. So I can have passion, but I don't throw anything at anybody. Ron, National Renewable Energy Laboratory, I talked a little bit today about the important role of research and development. It's really up in the air right now. Budget-wise, it's now January 2013. You get to go talk to your boss's boss. You get to go talk to the President of the United States. What would you say about it?
Three things, and I think very similar to what the other panelists have said so far. First and foremost, we need a comprehensive approach. We need to bring all the technology solutions together. We need natural gas, at least in the short term, to bridge us, and I think over the long term, renewables and efficiency need to work together and including a smart grid. And we need to bring in biofuels, electric vehicles. So we need to get out of this mindset of kind of trying to pick a winner and a loser, bring a comprehensive approach on the technology side, and likewise we need policies combined with long-term R&D investment and capacity building. And then secondly, we need a real clear message that needs to come out of the White House and be supported by the whole community about the benefits of renewable energy and energy efficiency, the energy security benefits, the economic benefits, the health benefits, and then finally we need long-term consistent policies. Everybody has said it, but it's really critical.
I think you were in the room, at least when Kelly's panel was presenting. If you weren't paying attention, that's fine. Do you think you do a good job of communicating from the national laboratory standpoint of all of the developments that are happening, or even the potential to really change things with those kinds of inventions that are in the hopper?
No, I think we could do a lot more communication, and part of the problem is we tend to communicate mainly to the choir. We're communicating with industry, we're communicating with universities and our technical partners, but we're not doing a lot of outreach to the public and to folks that are more skeptical, and we're not doing enough communication to the youth. So there's definitely a lot more that we should be doing.
That actually may be the most serious indictment of the clean energy, movement, or whatever you want to call it, is that too often we talk to ourselves, and not enough to people who really disagree with us, and try and find ways where there's common ground. President Kennedy, we saw an earlier shot today where he talked about putting someone on the moon. He said, we're going to use technology that hasn't been invented yet. And I think there's some of that we should contemplate. The things that we need by 2050 are probably going to be done with things with instrumentation, with technology, with sort of chemical processes that we don't even know about now. Do you think that's right?
Oh, absolutely, and that's why we need to maintain a very robust investment in long-term research and innovation. I mean, the U.S. has been a leader in this area, and now is not the time to walk away from that leadership. It's to redouble our efforts, and if we combine it with strong policies, I think our industry will prosper.
Thanks. So Wes was just on CNN with Anderson Cooper. I am no Anderson Cooper, I know that, but I'm going to make a stab at it, okay?
You're better.
Listen, what we're talking about is January 2013, sort of assuming that nothing happens on energy policy, climate policy, but there's an appetite to do that, not knowing who the president will be, Republican or Democrat. If you had the ability to sit with the President of the United States and give them a message in part from sort of today, the takeaway from today, what would you talk to them about?
Well, I think the first thing you have to do is set a goal. And I think you then have to decide how you're going to reach that goal. You need a goal that's a stretch goal, but you need a goal that's achievable. I think there's a rich harvest of technology from 40 years of investment in renewable energy and into alternatives to foreign oil. But I think that the president is going to have a very hard time if he doesn't educate the people on this. I think one of the real problems we have is that the chief executive has to do more than use the bully pulpit. In this situation with climate, he has to be the educator in chief. And we've lost that battle. Rush Limbaugh beat us. He defeated over $1 billion worth of publicity and studies on climate. You cannot talk about global warming and get away with it with the general public today without them saying, well, I think maybe, that's kind of stretched, and maybe it's just, we haven't won that argument. So I think you've got to do that, and then I think the president, he has to have a real plan to do this. Now, I was talking this morning about how I would do it, and Boone Pickens chimed in, and Denny McGinn, and I think, we can all see that you say use your own resources. You've got to have somebody in charge of it. The Secretary of Energy is not in charge of energy in this country. I mean, he doesn't buy energy, he doesn't sell energy, he doesn't set policies, he doesn't prescribe fuel usage. He's part of the group, but he's not really in charge of energy. So you need somebody who really is in charge of making the goal happen. And then if you look at it and say, well, what are the obstacles to it? It's not money. There's plenty of money available in the private sector to pay for this.